Boarding passes are supposed to be simple pieces of paper that guarantee your seat. But for 19-year-old Chloe, her first-class ticket became a lightning rod for unparalleled prejudice. Airport terminals witnessed countless goodbyes and hellos, yet what unfolded at Gate B-22 at Dallas-Fort Worth International was a masterclass in catastrophic judgment. A seasoned gate agent looked at a young black woman in sweatpants, decided she didn't belong in the priority lane, and triggered a chain of events that would end her own career in spectacular, humiliating fashion. Judgment is swift, but karma is absolute. Dallas/Fort Worth International Airport was a sprawling metropolis of steel, glass, and perpetual motion. Inside Terminal D, the air smelled faintly of overpriced roasted coffee and the sterile, metallic scent of jet fuel bleeding through the ventilation system. It was 6 a.m. on a Friday, the busiest travel day of the week, and the terminal was already teeming with exhausted business travelers, crying infants, and frantic vacationers. Standing behind the podium at Gate B-22 was Rebecca Linley. With 15 years of experience working for Meridian Airlines, Rebecca viewed herself not just as a gate agent, but as the ultimate gatekeeper. She wore her navy blue uniform with military precision, her name tag perfectly aligned, her hair pulled back into a severe, unyielding bun. Over the years, the stress of the job had hardened her. She had developed a rigid internal algorithm for who belonged where. To Rebecca, first-class passengers looked a certain way. Tailored suits, designer luggage, expensive watches, and an air of quiet, entitled impatience. The flight boarding today was Flight 409, a direct route to London Heathrow. It was a flagship route, and the first-class cabin was an exclusive sanctuary of lie-flat pods and champagne. As the overhead PA system chimed, Rebecca grabbed the microphone. "Good morning, passengers. Meridian Airlines Flight 409 is now beginning the boarding process. We would like to invite our first-class Diamond Medallion and Priority corporate members to board through the premium lane at this time." A small, orderly queue began to form. Among the tailored blazers and leather briefcases stood Chloe Sterling. Chloe was 19, a sophomore at a prestigious university in London, heading back after spending the holidays in Texas. She carried no designer handbag, nor did she exude the wealthy arrogance Rebecca expected. Chloe was dressed for a 10-hour transatlantic flight. She wore a faded, oversized gray hoodie, comfortable black sweatpants, and a pair of worn-out white sneakers. Her natural hair was pulled up into a messy puff, and she was carrying a scuffed backpack slung over one shoulder. She was tired, scrolling quietly on her phone, minding her own business as she stepped into the red-carpeted priority lane. From her perch behind the podium, Rebecca's eyes locked onto Chloe. The gate agent's posture immediately stiffened. Her internal algorithm screamed that an error was occurring. Group 4 passenger trying to sneak in early, Rebecca concluded instantly. It was an assumption born of years of unchecked, subtle prejudices. In Rebecca's world, a young black girl dressed in sweatpants simply did not belong in the sanctuary of first class. As Chloe approached the scanner holding out her digital boarding pass on her phone, Rebecca stepped sideways, physically blocking the path to the jet bridge. "Excuse me, miss," Rebecca said, her tone dripping with a saccharine, condescending sweetness that masked her irritation. "This lane is for first-class and diamond members only. General boarding, which includes basic economy, will not be called for another 40 minutes. You need to step aside." Chloe blinked, looking up from her phone. She offered a polite, somewhat tired smile. "Oh, I know. I'm in first class. Seat 2A. She extended her phone toward the optical scanner. Before the laser could read the QR code, Rebecca placed her hand over the scanner's glass lens. "Miss, I don't have time for games today," Rebecca said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the fake sweetness. "This is a sold-out international flight. I know exactly who is sitting in my first-class cabin, and you are not one of them. Please step out of the priority lane before I have to call security for disrupting the boarding process." Chloe's smile faded, replaced by a look of genuine confusion. "I'm not playing a game. Here is my boarding pass. She held the phone closer so Rebecca could read the screen. The bold letters, first class, priority were clearly visible, alongside the flight number and her name, C. Sterling. Rebecca barely glanced at the screen. Her mind was already made up. Screenshots are easily faked, Rebecca scoffed, crossing her arms. Kids do it all the time on TikTok to try and get an upgrade. I need you to step to the back of the line. Now, the businessman standing behind Chloe, a middle-aged man in a charcoal suit, cleared his throat loudly, checking his Rolex. Is there a problem here? He muttered impatiently. No problem, sir, Rebecca assured him with a bright professional smile. Just a confused young lady in the wrong line. We'll have you on board in just a moment. Naut. Edis. Chloe felt a flush of heat rise in her cheeks. The public dismissal, the immediate assumption of deceit. It was a familiar, exhausting script. But Chloe was not one to be bullied, nor was she easily intimidated. She stood her ground, her posture straightening. I am not confused, and this is not a screenshot, Chloe stated, her voice calm but carrying enough volume to be heard by the surrounding passengers. If you would simply remove your hand from the scanner, the system will verify my ticket. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. The girl's defiance felt like a personal insult. She removed her hand from the scanner with a dramatic sigh. Fine, but when this flashes red, I am pulling you out of the line permanently. Chloe held her phone under the laser. Beep. The scanner flashed a bright, undeniable green. The monitor on Rebecca's podium immediately updated, displaying Chloe's name, seat assignment, and a bold yellow tag that read, VIP Corporate. Do not downgrade. Rebecca stared at the monitor, her jaw tightening. The machine had validated the ticket, but Rebecca's pride refused to accept the reality in front of her. Instead of apologizing and waving Chloe through, a darker, more paranoid suspicion took root in the gate agent's mind. Step over to the desk, Rebecca ordered abruptly, pointing to the side podium away from the jet bridge doors. Why? Chloe asked, frustration finally bleeding into her voice. The scanner turned green. My ticket is valid. Noslet. And where? The system validated the code. But that doesn't mean you are the rightful owner of this ticket, Rebecca retorted, her voice dripping with venom. Step to the desk. I need to see your government-issued ID and the credit card used to purchase this flight. Now. The atmosphere at Gate B-22 shifted from the mundane annoyance of travel to the electric, uncomfortable tension of a public confrontation. The line of first-class passengers had come to a complete halt. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Phones were subtly pulled out of pockets, camera lenses pointing toward the podium. Chloe walked over to the side desk, dropping her backpack onto the floor with a heavy thud. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her wallet, and extracted her Texas driver's license, sliding it across the counter. Here is my ID, Chloe said, maintaining eye contact. Her heart was beating faster now, a mixture of adrenaline and indignity. As for the credit card, I don't have it. The ticket was booked through my father's corporate account. Rebecca snatched the ID from the counter, scrutinizing the plastic card as if expecting the ink to smudge under her thumb. She looked at the photo, then up at Chloe, then back at the card. Chloe Sterling. The name matched the ticket, but Rebecca was already too deep into her own narrative to back down. The phrase father's corporate account sounded to her like a desperate improvised lie. A first-class ticket to London cost upwards of $10,000. The girl standing in front of her in a faded hoodie did not fit the profile of a corporate elite. A corporate account, Rebecca repeated mockingly, her fingers flying aggressively across her mechanical keyboard. She pulled up the reservation in the Amadeus booking system. Let's see here. This ticket was booked less than 12 hours ago. It's an unrestricted, fully refundable first-class fare. And you claim your father bought this? Yes, Chloe said firmly. He travels a lot. His office handles my travel. I find that highly unlikely, Rebecca said, leaning over the counter, invading Chloe's space. "What I find likely is that this ticket was purchased using a stolen credit card number online, and you thought you could just breeze through security before the fraud department flagged it. We see this all the time." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Several passengers in the waiting area gasped. "Are you accusing me of credit card fraud?" Chloe asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Because I strongly advise you to look closer at that computer screen before you make that a formal accusation. I am an airline professional with 15 years of experience," Rebecca snapped, her face flushing with anger. She felt her authority being challenged by a teenager, and she was having none of it. "I don't need advice from a scam artist." "Not. And Rebecca picked up the heavy black telephone receiver on her desk and punched in a 3-digit extension. She kept her eyes locked on Chloe, a victorious smirk playing on her lips. "Dispatch, this is gate B22, Lindley," Rebecca said into the phone. "I have a fraudulent boarding situation. I need airport police and a Meridian corporate security supervisor down here immediately. The passenger is attempting to fly on a stolen high-value ticket and is becoming combative." "I haven't even raised my voice," Chloe pointed out, shaking her head in disbelief. "Stay exactly where you are," Rebecca commanded, slamming the phone down. She then turned back to the microphone to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We are dealing with a security issue at the podium. We will resume boarding shortly." The humiliation was designed to break Chloe. Rebecca wanted her to panic, to cry, to turn around and run away before the police arrived. It was a power trip, pure and simple. But Chloe didn't run. She didn't cry. Instead, she leaned against the counter, crossed her arms, and took a deep breath. She knew exactly who she was, and, more importantly, she knew exactly who her father was. If this gate agent wanted a storm, Chloe was perfectly willing to let it rain. 10 minutes passed in agonizing slow motion. The crowd grew restless. Some passengers yelled at Rebecca to just let the girl on the plane. Others muttered under their breath about kids these days and security risks. Finally, the crowd parted as 2 men in uniform approached the gate. The first was Officer Reynolds of the DFW Airport Police, a burly man with a calm, analytical demeanor. Behind him was a man in a sharp gray suit, wearing a Meridian Airlines badge that read, "Thomas, Station Manager." "Rebecca, what's the situation?" the station manager asked, looking exasperated. Delays on international flights cost the airline thousands of dollars a minute, and he was not happy to be called down to a gate dispute. "This individual," Rebecca said, pointing a manicured finger at Chloe, "is attempting to board Flight 409 using a fraudulent ticket. The system flagged it as a VIP corporate pass, but she has no matching credit card, and the booking was made at midnight last night. I suspect stolen financial information. I held her here to protect the airline's assets." And Officer Reynolds turned to Chloe's, assessing her. He didn't see a combative scam artist. He saw a calm, highly irritated teenager. "Miss, do you have your identification?" Reynolds asked respectfully. Chloe handed him the driver's license that Rebecca had left sitting on the counter. "My name is Chloe Sterling. My ticket is fully valid. This agent stopped me solely because she didn't like the way I looked, and then proceeded to accuse me of a felony in front of 200 people. Officer Reynolds looked at the ID, then looked at the booking screen that the station manager Thomas was currently leaning over to inspect. Thomas typed his override credentials into the keyboard to view the deep-level coding of the ticket. He bypassed the standard gate agent view and looked at the primary billing account. His eyes scanned the digital text, ACC count older, stern global avigation. Beckoning, direct eliger, status chairman owner. Thomas froze. The color drained from his face so rapidly he looked as though he were about to faint. He stopped breathing for a solid 3 seconds. "Rebecca," Thomas whispered, his voice trembling. "Did you look at the billing code on this reservation?" "I don't need to look at the billing code, Thomas," Rebecca scoffed loudly, completely oblivious to how managers panic. "Look at her. Does she look like a VIP corporate client to you? She's trying to game the system." But, Officer Reynolds, noticing the station manager's sudden terrified silence, leaned over to look at the screen himself. Reynolds wasn't an airline employee, but he worked at DFW long enough to know the major players. He read the words Sterling Global Aviation. Slowly, Officer Reynolds turned his head to look out the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the terminal. Terminal D was an architectural marvel, featuring massive expanses of glass that offered panoramic views of the active runways and the sprawling aviation infrastructure of Dallas-Fort Worth. If one were to look out the window directly behind Gate B-22 past the commercial jets and the baggage carts, their eyes would land on the private aviation sector of the airport. There, dominating the landscape, was a brand-new colossal private hangar. It was a state-of-the-art facility, large enough to house 3 Boeing business jets simultaneously. The building was gleaming white, but what made it impossible to miss was the massive, freshly painted lettering across the top of the structure, reflecting the morning Texas sun in brilliant, gold-leafed typography. The sign read, "Sterling Global Aviation." Beneath it, in slightly smaller but equally imposing letters, was the dedication, "Jonathan Stern, CO." Officer Reynolds looked at the massive gold letters on the hangar outside. Then he looked at the ID in his hand, Chloe Sterling. Then he looked back out the window. The pieces clicked together in his mind with the heavy, undeniable thud of a falling safe. He slowly handed the ID back to Chloe. "My apologies for the delay, miss." "Sterling," he said, his voice carrying a sudden, profound respect. He took a deliberate step back, distancing himself entirely from Rebecca and the airline staff. "You are not under any suspicion of any crime. You are free to board whenever you wish." "What are you doing?" Rebecca shrieked, slamming her hand on the podium. "She is a fraud. You can't just let her go because she batted her eyelashes at you." "Rebecca, shut your mouth," Thomas hissed. It wasn't a corporate, professional reprimand. It was a desperate, panicked plea. Sweat was beading on his forehead. "Shut your mouth right now and step away from the keyboard." "No!" Rebecca doubled down, blinded by her own stubbornness and the fact that she had an audience. She refused to be wrong. She violently grabbed her mouse and clicked the red Cancel Passenger button on the Amadeus interface. "If you won't do your job, Thomas, I will do mine. I am offloading her from this flight. She is a security risk. Air." The system chimed loudly. A red box popped up on the screen, ACCESS denied. "Clearance level insufficient. Ticket locked by easy SUTIVE override." "What is wrong with this stupid system?" Rebecca muttered, furiously clicking the button again and again. "The system is fine, Rebecca," Chloe said. The teenager hadn't moved. She just watched the gate agent self-destruct with a look of cold, hard pity. "You can't cancel my ticket because your security clearance isn't high enough to alter an executive board-level reservation." Rebecca finally stopped clicking. She looked up at Chloe, a sneer twisting her features. "Executive board? What kind of lie is that?" Thomas, practically vibrating with anxiety, grabbed Rebecca by the shoulder and forcibly spun her around. He didn't point at the computer screen. Instead, he pointed a trembling finger out the massive terminal window toward the private tarmac. "Look out the window, Rebecca," Thomas ordered, his voice cracking. "I don't have time to look at airplanes, Thomas. I am trying to—" "Look out the damn window!" Thomas roared, completely losing his professional composure. The shout echoed through the terminal. The 200 passengers waiting to board fell dead silent. Even the crying baby in row 12 seemed to pause. Startled, Rebecca turned her head and looked through the glass. Her eyes scanned past the tail of the Meridian Airlines Boeing 777 tray. She looked across the runway, her gaze landing on the massive private hangar. The gold letters caught the light. Starling Global Aviation. Rebecca stared at the word Sterling. Her brain, sluggish under the weight of her own prejudice, slowly began to process the information. "Do you know who owns that hangar, Rebecca?" Thomas asked, his voice now a hollow whisper. "Do you know who handles the maintenance contracts for the entire Meridian Airlines fleet? Do you know whose company effectively holds the lease on half the planes we fly?" "Lock. I'd swear to..." Rebecca didn't answer. Her mouth had gone dry. Thomas slowly turned back to Chloe. "Miss Sterling, I cannot adequately express my profound apologies for what has transpired here today. This does not reflect the values of Meridian Airlines. Actually, Thomas, I think it reflects exactly what happens at Meridian Airlines when the cameras aren't rolling," Chloe replied, her voice steady and clear. "My father and I had a long conversation last night about the culture of the airlines he partners with. He assured me Meridian was top tier. I think he will be very interested to hear about my experience in your priority lane." Rebecca's face had drained of all color. She looked from the hangar to Chloe's face and back to the hangar. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The teenager she had just publicly humiliated, racially profiled and accused of a felony, wasn't the scam artist. She was the daughter of Jonathan Sterling, the billionaire aviation magnate whose company literally held the keys to Meridian Airlines' operational success. I didn't," Rebecca stammered, taking a step backward, her previous bravado entirely evaporating. "I was just following security protocols. Her clothes, the booking time." "You followed your prejudice, Rebecca," Chloe interrupted, her tone devoid of sympathy. "You looked at my skin, you looked at my hoodie, and you decided I was a criminal. You didn't care about the green scanner. You didn't care about the ID." Chloe picked up her worn-out backpack and slung it over her shoulder. She looked past the trembling gate agent and addressed the station manager. "Thomas, I am going to board the plane now," Chloe said. "When I land in London, I expect a phone call from your corporate office. Until then, I strongly suggest you find a new gate agent to finish boarding this flight. I don't think she is fit to continue." Thomas nodded frantically. "Yes, Mom. Immediately. Please let me escort you to your seat personally." As Thomas rushed to scan Chloe's ticket himself and usher her down the jet bridge, Officer Reynolds simply shook his head at Rebecca. The once proud gatekeeper was left standing completely alone at the podium, staring out the window at the massive gold letters of the Sterling hangar, realizing she had just destroyed her 15-year career in exactly 10 minutes. But the flight to London was long, and as Chloe settled into C2A, she knew the story wasn't over. Her father was not a man who took insults to his family lightly. The immediate humiliation at the gate was merely the tremor. The real earthquake was yet to come. The heavy steel doors of the Boeing 777 sealed shut with a definitive, pressurized hiss, locking out the chaos of Terminal D. Inside the first-class cabin of Flight 499, the atmosphere was entirely different. It was a hushed, climate-controlled sanctuary of ambient lighting, polished wood veneer, and the soft clinking of crystal glassware. Chloe sank into the plush leather of C2A, pulling the privacy partition half closed. A flight attendant named Gregory, bearing a silver tray, approached her with the kind of deference usually reserved for royalty. He had clearly been briefed by Thomas before the jet bridge pulled away. "Miss Sterling," Gregory murmured, setting a warm eucalyptus-scented towel and a glass of sparkling water on her console. "On behalf of the entire flight crew, I want to extend our deepest apologies for the incident at the gate. If there is absolutely anything you need during our journey to Heathrow, you have my undivided attention." "Thank you, Gregory. I appreciate that," Chloe replied, offering a weary smile. She wiped her hands with the warm towel, feeling the residual adrenaline slowly drain from her muscles, leaving behind a dull, throbbing exhaustion. As the massive aircraft taxied toward the runway, Chloe pulled her phone from her pocket. The aircraft's high-speed satellite Wi-Fi connected seamlessly. She bypassed her social media notifications and opened her encrypted messaging app, selecting a contact labeled simply as Dad. Chloe, boarded, Flight 409. 3 dots immediately appeared on the screen. Jonathan Sterling was not a man who missed messages. Dad, are you all right? My office flagged a priority alert from the Amadeus GDS. Someone tried to forcibly cancel your PNR at the gate. Executive override held it. Chloe let out a long breath. She typed out the reality of the last 40 minutes. She detailed the gate agent, Rebecca Linley. She explained the profiling, the blatant dismissal of her valid ticket, the accusation of credit card fraud, and the public humiliation of having airport police summoned. She kept her text factual, devoid of hyperbole, knowing her father needed data, not just emotion. 1,000 miles away, in the penthouse suite of the Sterling Global Aviation headquarters overlooking downtown Chicago, Jonathan Sterling read the message. Jonathan was 58, a self-made titan in the aerospace logistics sector. He was a man who operated entirely on precision and accountability. Sterling Global didn't just lease aircraft. They managed the heavy maintenance, avionics upgrades, and supply chain logistics for 3 of the world's largest commercial carriers, including Meridian Airlines. When he read his daughter's words, a cold, absolute stillness descended over him. He did not yell. He did not throw his coffee cup against the wall. Men of his caliber knew that anger was a cheap emotion. Leverage was currency. He pressed the intercom button on his mahogany desk. "Helen," he sent to his executive assistant, "get Richard Hughes on the secure line." Now, Richard Hughes was the chief executive officer of Meridian Airlines. 2 minutes later, the line clicked. Jonathan, Richard's booming, affable voice echoed through the speakerphone. "Good morning. To what do I owe the pleasure? I'll be finalized on the engine overhaul contract for the 787 fleet." "Richard," Jonathan replied, his voice terrifyingly flat. 45 minutes ago, your gate agent at DFW Terminal D, Gate B22, attempted to deny my 19-year-old daughter boarding on Flight 409. The affable tone on the other end vanished instantly. "What?" "Jonathan, there must be a mistake. A system glitch." "There was no glitch, Richard." The scanner flashed green. The ticket was flagged as VIP corporate. Your agent, a woman named Rebecca Linley, looked at a young black woman in casual clothes and decided she was a criminal. She accused my daughter of felony credit card fraud in front of 200 passengers and called airport police. Potrero now, but that are in A heavy, suffocating silence filled the line. Richard Hughes knew exactly what was at stake. Meridian Airlines relied on Sterling Global for their operational survival. A disruption in their maintenance contracts would ground 20% of their fleet within a week. "Jonathan, I am appalled," Richard stammered, the color draining from his face even though he was alone in his office. "I will have this investigated immediately." "You won't investigate it, Richard. You will act on it," Jonathan corrected him, his tone leaving zero room for negotiation. "My daughter handled herself with more grace than your employee deserved. But I am not my daughter. I do not tolerate prejudice, and I certainly do not subsidize the payroll of a company that weaponizes it against my family." "What do you want me to do?" Richard asked, his voice tight. "I want that agent removed from the airport before my daughter lands in London. I want a complete audit of your gate staff's diversity and de-escalation training metrics delivered to my desk by Monday." "And Richard?" "Yes, Jonathan. If I ever hear of any passenger being treated like a criminal simply because your staff doesn't think they look the part of a first-class ticket holder, I will void our exclusivity clause and open Sterling's maintenance bays to your competitors. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, Jonathan." "I am handling this right now." Jonathan terminated the call. He looked out over the Chicago skyline, his jaw set in stone. He picked up his phone and texted Chloe. "Dad, rest easy, kid. It's being handled from the top down. Have a good flight." Back at DFW Airport, Flight 409 had been in the air for barely 20 minutes. The terminal had returned to its standard humming rhythm of rolling suitcases and PA announcements. But for Rebecca Linley, the world had entirely stopped spinning. She was standing behind the podium at Gate B22, staring blankly at the computer monitor. Her hands were shaking. The realization of what she had done and who she had done it to was a heavy, nauseating weight in her stomach. She kept replaying the moment she looked out the window at the gold lettering on the Sterling hangar. Sterling Global Aviation. Rebecca. The voice was sharp, cutting through her spiraling thoughts. She looked up to see Thomas, the station manager. He was no longer sweaty and panicked. His demeanor had shifted to a grim, professional detachment. Beside him stood a woman in a tailored black suit with a severe expression, clutching an iPad. Rebecca recognized her instantly. Evelyn Vance, the Regional Director of Human Resources for Meridian Airlines. When HR physically comes to the gate, careers are already over. "Log off your terminal, Rebecca," Thomas instructed quietly. "Hand me your security badge and your ramp keys." "Thomas, please," Rebecca whispered, her verbose, her voice cracking. "Let's go back to the office and talk about this. I was just following the red flags. It was an anomaly in the booking. It was a midnight booking. Fully refundable, no matching physical card. Log off," Evelyn interrupted, her voice entirely devoid of warmth. "You are causing a scene. You will surrender your credentials right now, or Officer Reynolds will return to escort you out of the secure area." Rebecca's breath hitched. She looked around. Passengers waiting for a later flight to Miami were beginning to stare. The humiliation she had tried to force upon Chloe just an hour prior was now rebounding onto her with devastating accuracy. With trembling fingers, Rebecca unclipped the lanyard from her neck. Her ID badge, which she had worn like a badge of absolute authority for 15 years, clattered onto the podium. She handed over her heavy ring of brass keys. "Follow me," Evelyn commanded. The walk from Gate B22 to the corporate administration offices hidden deep within Terminal D felt like a death march. Rebecca walked slightly behind Thomas and Evelyn, her head bowed. She passed colleagues she had known for a decade. Some looked away, others whispered to each other. Word traveled at the speed of light in the aviation industry. Everyone already knew the veteran gate agent had stopped the CEO of Sterling Global's daughter and accused her of a felony. They entered a windowless, sterile conference room. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. In the center of the table was a black speakerphone. The green light was already illuminated, indicating an active call. "We have her in the room, Mr. Cole," Evelyn said, addressing the speakerphone. Harrison Cole was the Executive Vice President of Employee Relations at Meridian Airlines corporate headquarters in Atlanta. "Have a seat, Ms. Linley," Harrison's voice crackled through the speaker. It was not a request. Rebecca sat down heavily in a rigid mesh chair. "Mr. Cole," she started, desperately trying to construct a defense. "I have 15 years of exemplary service. I have caught over a dozen fraudulent tickets in my career. I was operating under standard loss prevention protocols. The passenger's attire and the booking timeline fit the exact profile of a compromised asset." "Stop talking, Rebecca," Harrison snapped. "Do not insult our intelligence by hiding behind loss prevention protocols. We have pulled the digital logs from Amadeus. We saw the VIP corporate flag. We saw the green light on the scanner. We saw the executive's override when you maliciously attempted to cancel her ticket out of pure spite." "Burgle. Oh, Mal. So what?" Rebecca flinched as if she had been struck. I thought it was a hack." "What you thought," Harrison continued, his voice dropping into a deadly rhythmic cadence, "was that a young black woman in a hoodie had no business sitting in first class. You profiled her. You bypassed standard customer service protocols. You ignored the empirical data on your own computer screen, and you chose to escalate the situation to law enforcement based entirely on your own bias. I am protected by the union, Rebecca fired back, panic making her defensive. I have the right to challenge suspicious passengers. I demand my union representative. Your union representative, Marcus Trent, was fully briefed 10 minutes ago, Harrison replied coldly. After reviewing the bystander video that is currently sitting in my inbox, a video clearly showing you threatening a passenger whose scanner flashed green, the union has officially declined to grieve this disciplinary action. You willfully violated the airline's strict Title VII anti-discrimination policies. Rebecca felt the room spinning. Bystander video. Of course. The businessman in the charcoal suit with the Rolex. The crowd of people with their phones out. Furthermore, Harrison continued, dealing the final blow. 30 minutes ago, our CEO, Richard Hughes, received a personal phone call from Jonathan Sterling. Do you comprehend the magnitude of the liability you have just exposed this company to? Rebecca opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Sterling Global Aviation controls the maintenance and leasing for a fifth of our fleet, Harrison stated brutally. Because of your arrogance this morning, Jonathan Sterling threatened to pull those contracts. You didn't just insult a passenger, Rebecca. You nearly grounded our airline. Tears finally spilled over Rebecca's lower lashes, hot and stinging. The armor of her authority had been completely stripped away, leaving only the devastating reality of her own prejudice. Effective immediately, Evelyn said, taking over from Harrison and sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. Your employment with Meridian Airlines is terminated with cause. You will receive no severance. Your flight privileges are permanently revoked. Furthermore, due to the nature of this termination involving a severe violation of federal anti-discrimination guidelines, a permanent note will be placed in your PI file. The Pilot Records Improvement Act, PRI file, was a database used across the aviation industry. While typically for pilots, severe security and discrimination violations by ground staff were often logged in shared industry background checks. You're blacklisting me. Rebecca gasped, staring at the termination paper. From the whole industry? You blacklisted yourself, Thomas said quietly, speaking for the first time since they entered the room. When you looked out that window at the hangar and chose your pride over your job. Sign the paperwork, Rebecca, Evelyn instructed, handing her a pen. Then security will escort you to the employee parking lot. You have 10 minutes. Rebecca's hand shook violently as she picked up the pen. The signature she scrawled at the bottom of the page was jagged and unrecognizable. As she stood up, flanked by 2 airport security officers who had silently entered the room, she realized the absolute permanence of karma. She had tried to deny a 19-year-old girl a seat on an airplane. In return, she had been entirely erased from the sky. Monday morning arrived at the Meridian Airlines corporate headquarters in Atlanta with the destructive force of a Category 5 hurricane. High above the city, inside the glass-walled boardroom of the executive suite, CEO Richard Hughes stood at the head of a massive mahogany table. He looked entirely worn out, his usually perfectly tailored suit looking slightly rumpled, his face pale. Seated around the table were the airline's heavyweights, Harrison Cole from Employee Relations, the Chief Operating Officer, the Chief Legal Counsel, and via a secure video link, 3 major shareholder representatives from the Vanguard Group. Richard clicked a remote, and the massive screen at the end of the room illuminated. It wasn't a financial projection or a route map. It was a shaky vertical cell phone video. The footage had been purchased Sunday night by a major aviation news outlet. But Richard's crisis management team had managed to secure a temporary injunction to delay its publication by 24 hours. The video, captured by the businessman in the charcoal suit, showed exactly what transpired at Gate B-22. It captured Rebecca Linley's sneering face, her condescending tone, and her explicit accusation of felony credit card fraud, directed at Chloe Sterling. It clearly captured the scanner's loud, validating beep and the flashing green light, which Rebecca blatantly ignored. Worst of all, it captured the exact moment Thomas, the station manager, pointed frantically out the terminal window toward the Sterling Global Aviation hangar. When the video ended, the boardroom descended into a suffocating silence. "That," Richard said, his voice ragged, "is a nuclear bomb sitting on our doorstep. The young woman in the hoodie is Chloe Sterling, daughter of Jonathan Sterling. For those of you unaware, Sterling Global handles the heavy avionics maintenance for 140 of our Boeing aircraft and holds the leases on 50 more. The chief legal counsel, a sharp-featured woman named Margaret, leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. I received a courier package at my home at 6 o'clock yesterday morning. It was from Cravath, Swain and Moore, Jonathan Sterling's primary external counsel. It was a formal notice of anticipatory breach of faith. They are auditing our entire corporate culture. If they find that our staff systematically engages in discriminatory profiling, they have a legal loophole to terminate our exclusivity contracts within 90 days. A collective groan echoed through the room. Terminating those contracts wouldn't just hurt Meridian Airlines, it would paralyze them. Flights would be grounded, stock prices would plummet. It was an extinction-level event over a single arrogant gate agent. "Harrison," Richard barked, turning to the VP of Employee Relations. "Tell me you fired her. Tell me you fired her so fast her head is still spinning." Rebecca Linley's employment was terminated with cause before Flight 409 even reached the Atlantic Ocean, Harrison confirmed, flipping through a thick dossier. She surrendered her badge and was escorted off airport property by DFW police. We also suspended station manager Thomas pending a full review of his leadership, as he allowed the situation to escalate before intervening. "Good," the COO muttered. "But it's not enough. Sterling wants blood, and frankly, he deserves it. We need to dismantle the culture that allowed this woman to think she could act as judge, jury, and executioner." While the executives scrambled to save their multi-billion-dollar company, Rebecca Linley was sitting at the kitchen table of her suburban Dallas apartment, frantically dialing numbers. She was operating under a delusion fueled by years of unchecked authority. She believed she was the victim. She called her union representative, William Trent, for the 4th time that morning. "William, you have to file the grievance." Rebecca pleaded into the phone, her voice shaking with a mix of fury and terror. "They didn't give me a warning. They just ambushed me with HR. I was protecting the airline. The booking looked fraudulent." "No. Knox. Not. God. Aldefuller-Brandt." William sighed, a heavy, exhausted sound. "Rebecca, I told you on Friday, and I would tell you one last time today. The union is not touching this. We cannot protect you from this. I pay my dues," she shrieked. "You are legally obligated to represent me." "We represent members in disputes over labor practices, Rebecca. We do not defend gross violations of federal civil rights laws," William replied coldly. "I saw the digital logs from the Amadeus system. You tried to forcibly cancel an executive board-level ticket after the system verified it. You bypassed 3 security prompts to try and offload a passenger because you didn't like her outfit. Furthermore, we saw the bystander video. You racially profiled a 19-year-old girl and accused her of a felony. It wasn't about race." Rebecca deflected instantly, though the hollow ring of her voice betrayed her. "It was about security protocol. Save it for a lawyer if you can find one dumb enough to take your case," William snapped. "Meridian HR placed a severe Title VII violation on your permanent PRIA record. Your federal security clearance for the Secure Identification Display Area, the CEDAR badge, has been permanently revoked by the FAA. You're done in aviation, Rebecca. Do not call this office again." The line went dead. Rebecca stared at her phone, the blood draining from her face. The PRIA record. The Pilot Records Improvement Act database wasn't just for pilots anymore. It was a comprehensive background check system shared by every airline, ground handling company, and airport authority in the country. A severe discrimination and security abuse flag meant she couldn't get a job throwing bags on the tarmac, let she alone work a computer at a gate. She couldn't even get hired to sell overpriced magazines at a terminal kiosk, because she could not pass the background check required to pass through the TSA employee portals. Her 15-year career, her seniority, her flight benefits, her $80,000 salary, her identity as the ultimate gatekeeper of the first-class lane, all of it had been incinerated in the span of a single morning. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, the corporate machine moved with ruthless efficiency to appease their most vital partner. Richard Hughes personally drafted a public apology that was blasted across every social media platform just hours before the bystander video inevitably leaks to the press. Meridian Airlines announced a sweeping internal audit. They terminated 3 other gate agents in the Dallas hub who had a history of passenger complaints regarding racial profiling. They donated $5 million to a scholarship fund for minority students pursuing degrees in aerospace engineering, a fund explicitly chosen because it was chaired by Jonathan Sterling. The twist of the knife, however, came on Tuesday afternoon. Rebecca received a certified letter in the mail from Meridian's legal department. Because her termination was classified as with cause due to gross misconduct and civil rights violations, the company was legally stripping her of all unvested company stock options and severing her from the corporate pension plan's future accruals. She had tried to strip Chloe Sterling of a first-class seat. In return, the universe had entirely stripped Rebecca of her future. 6 months later, the damp grey chill of a London autumn hung over Heathrow Airport. Chloe Sterling walked off a flight from Dubai, bypassing the crowded commercial terminals entirely. She stepped off a gleaming white Gulfstream 6650ER, the gold Sterling Global Aviation logo shining proudly on its tail. She wore a comfortable, oversized black hoodie, dark leggings, and worn-out sneakers. She carried the same scuffed backpack she had carried half a year prior. As she walked across the private tarmac, a ground handler in a high-visibility vest offered a polite, respectful nod. Chloe smiled back. Her life had continued unbothered. She was a top-tier student, deeply involved in her university life, entirely unaffected by the drama that had erupted in Texas. Her father had shielded her from the corporate fallout, ensuring she never had to deal with a single reporter or lawyer. She had simply demanded respect, stood her ground, and let the immense weight of consequence handle the rest. Thousands of miles away, under the blistering, unforgiving sun of a Texas afternoon, consequence looked very different, far from the glamorous international bustle of DFW Airport. Tucked away in a depressing, sun-bleached strip mall in the sprawling suburbs of Arlington, sat a low-budget car rental agency. The air inside the small office smelled of cheap pine floor cleaner and old coffee. The fluorescent lights flickered annoyingly. Standing behind the chipped laminate counter, wearing an ill-fitting mustard yellow polo shirt with a plastic name tag, was Rebecca Lindley. The transition from a senior gate agent at a flagship international terminal to a desk clerk at a secondary car rental agency had been a brutal, soul-crushing descent. Without her SETA badge, her aviation career was dead. Without a college degree and with the highly toxic employment record that required extensive explaining, corporate jobs refused to touch her. She spent her days dealing with angry tourists, complaining about the smell of smoke in compact sedans, processing endless stacks of insurance paperwork, and listening to the monotonous hum of the highway outside. There was no prestige here. There were no VIP lanes. There was only the grinding reality of minimum wage and lost glory. The bell above the glass door chimed, signaling a customer. Rebecca forced a tight, artificial smile onto her face and looked up from her computer monitor. "Welcome to Budget Wheels. How can I help you today?" Walking through the door was a young woman, perhaps 20 years old. She was black, wearing casual gray sweatpants, a cropped t-shirt, and carrying a canvas tote bag. She looked tired, likely having just taken a rideshare from the airport. "Hey," the young woman said politely. "I have a reservation under the name Hayes. It should be a premium SUV." Rebecca's fingers hovered over her keyboard. A premium SUV was the most expensive vehicle on their lot, running nearly $200 a day. Her old instincts, the dark, ugly prejudices that had ruined her life, flared up for a microsecond. She looked at the young woman's casual clothes. She looked at the canvas bag. The internal broken algorithm in her head whispered that this girl couldn't possibly afford a premium rental. But then the memory of massive gold letters on a private hangar flashed violently in her mind. The phantom echo of the station manager screaming at her to look out the window rang in her ears. The memory of the Pyrie blacklist, the lost pension, the utter humiliation. Rebecca physically swallowed the lump of bile in her throat. She lowered her eyes, completely breaking her own toxic cycle through sheer traumatized conditioning. "Of course, Miss Hayes," Rebecca said, her voice quiet, entirely devoid of the sneering arrogance she once possessed. "Let me pull that up for you right now." "Thanks," the young woman smiled, reaching into her tote bag. She pulled out a sleek, heavy metal corporate credit card and placed it softly on the counter. "The reservation was made for my firm's corporate account." Rebecca stared at the credit card. It was a black, exclusive corporate card. In the bottom corner, the name of the parent company was embossed in silver lettering, Sterling Global Logistics. Rebecca's breath caught in her lungs. The air in the cheap rental office suddenly felt impossibly thin. The universe has a profound, almost cruel sense of poetry when it delivers karma. It doesn't just knock you down, it makes sure you recognize the exact shape of the boot that stepped on you. This young woman wasn't Chloe, but she was part of the same world, a world Rebecca had arrogantly believed she had the right to gatekeep. With trembling hands, Rebecca picked up the card. She didn't ask for a second form of ID. She didn't question the booking time. She didn't say a single word about the young woman's sweatpants. "I will have the keys for you in just a moment, Mom," Rebecca whispered, keeping her eyes locked firmly on the computer screen, terrified that if she looked up, the universe might find another way to punish her. She processed the transaction with absolute flawless subservience. She handed over the keys to a brand-new Cadillac Escalade, walked the young woman to the door, and wished her a safe journey. As the heavy SUV pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared down the Texas highway, Rebecca Linley stood alone in the dingy, pine-scented office. She looked down at her mustard-yellow polo shirt, then out the window at the bleak strip mall. She finally understood the absolute truth of her situation. Power is not determined by the lane you control, but by the respect you show to the people walking through it. She had tried to humiliate a young girl to protect her own fragile ego, and in doing so she had built her own perfect, inescapable prison. The sky belonged to Chloe Sterling. Rebecca was permanently grounded. True power doesn't need to shout, and true wealth doesn't always wear a suit. This story is a harsh, real-world reminder that prejudice is not only morally bankrupt, but it can utterly destroy the life of the person wielding it. Gatekeepers who abuse their authority often find out the hard way that the people they try to hold back are the ones who own the building. Karma doesn't miss, and it never forgets a face. If this story of justice, absolute karma, and corporate reckoning kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button to support the channel. Share this video with someone who loves a brilliant comeback story. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another deep dive into real-life drama and undeniable justice. See you in the next one.